All right, let's talk about the NFL wildcard rounds. It's today's what, Wednesday, January 8th. We've got NFL playoff games in like 4 days, which is crazy to me because I've been thinking so much about Notre Dame, thinking so much about the Colts and their season ending, the Pacers. The NFL wildcard is just casually happening this weekend. We've got 2 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, and a game on Monday. It's a fantastic playoff field. Especially as the weeks go on. The deeper we get into the playoffs, the more exciting I think it's going to be. I think this divisional round is going to be one of the best weekends of the NFL history. My NFL viewing experience, I think this divisional round, this playoffs, is going to be one of the best weekends of it. Conference championship games, almost no matter how they go down, how they shake out, who's there, they're going to be fantastic, and hopefully we get a good Super Bowl. Because this regular season was a little bit lackluster, and I hope the playoffs can really make up for it. And I think that the deeper we go, the more fun it will get, which is the best part of the playoffs when every time you think you've seen the best you can possibly receive, you know there's more next week. Chargers, they're favored by 3 at the Houston Texans at 4:30 on Saturday on CBS. Every team is injured, but the Texans have been absolutely gutted. Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, both out, most notably. Houston limped to an AFC South title. They wouldn't be in the playoffs if the Colts were competent or if the Jaguars or Titans were competent. Fortunately, the Texans are in a random assortment of, not random, but you understand what I'm saying. Just they're in the assortment of 4 teams that they're involved in the AFC South. They're the only team that can kind of show up week to week and at least act like a good football team. They were wrecked by Baltimore 31-2 on Christmas. The Chargers have had 3 big wins in a row, not necessarily against good teams, but they've won big, right? They beat the Patriots 40-7, most notably. I think the Chargers are going to win. I think this is a lost season for the Texans. It's never really felt like there's a lot of excitement going into the playoffs because of how injured they are. I feel bad for them. I love the Texans last year. I know I shouldn't. Division rival, shouldn't like them. I understand that. But they were fun, and they were enjoyable. And I thought that they were a Super Bowl contender this year. I called them that before the season started. It just doesn't really seem like the year that they're going to be able to make anything happen because of how injured they are, and the Chargers are playing well. I'll take the Chargers to go on the road against the Texans, win and cover -3. Steelers at Ravens is another one that I really have no doubt about. The Ravens are favored by 9.5. That's at 8 p.m. on Saturday on Amazon Prime, which I find funny. The Ravens, they're undefeated since the bye week. They've 4-0 since the bye week. They're playing incredible. One of those games they played since the bye week is this exact game, Steelers at Ravens, and the Ravens won 34-17. They did lose in Pittsburgh 19-17, I believe, earlier in the year, but most recently in Baltimore, they won by 2 touchdowns. Pittsburgh has lost 4 games in a row. They clinched the playoffs early and just have slid ever since. They had 3 consecutive opportunities against playoff teams, and then they played the Bengals. And the Bengals were hungry, and they have been playing like a playoff team. But those 3 consecutive opportunities against playoff teams, they lost them all, most of which by 2 scores. That includes a game in Baltimore. I think that the Ravens will win this game. I have no doubt about it. The question is whether or not they'll cover the 9.5. It is a division game. Anything can happen. They split the season series. But the Ravens, absolutely, to me, at home, are going to win this game. They're playing great. They're undefeated since the bye week. The Steelers are winless since that same week, I believe, including a loss to the Ravens on the road. In my opinion, the Steelers have no chance, and I'll take the Ravens to win that game. To finish the AFC on Sunday, the Broncos go to the Bills. The Bills are favored by 8.5 at 1 p.m. on Sunday on CBS. This is the widest gap in seeds, but I think it's going to be the most entertaining game. It's the most interesting game to me. I think the Texans are at a lost season. If they win a game, that'll be all they do. Chargers, I think, will win that game handily. I just said how I think the Ravens are the only team with a chance in that game between them and the Steelers. Broncos at Bills, 7-2 is a very interesting game to me. The Broncos are fun, but in meaningful games, they're 1-5 against playoff teams, right? They beat up on everybody below them, and they can't beat anybody above or equal to them, right? They beat the Chiefs, but the Chiefs were resting all their starters. They won that game 38-0. Great momentum to roll into this game with. Buffalo is at home. They're hungry for a Super Bowl. It feels like the year that they can finally do it because they already beat the Chiefs in the regular season. Yes, that game was at home. This time it'll be in Kansas City, but still. The Bills have shown that they can beat the best team in the AFC. There's no one else with a better record than them or even really that close. The Ravens game will be difficult if that happens. The Bills are at home, hungry for a Super Bowl, and the Broncos historically this season have not quite been able to knock off any teams above them, and the Bills are way above them in terms of quality of roster, in terms of competitive nature, in terms of their ability to go to and win the Super Bowl. It may not be the Bills' year, but it's not their time to lose in the wildcard rounds. Broncos, happy to be there. I'm happy they are there. They're a fun team. They deserve it. I think the Bills will win this game, and I think they'll win it handily. So some not very close games, in my opinion, in the AFC. I think the Chargers will win, the Ravens will win, and the Bills will win. Very chalky. I just have the favorites winning in the AFC. But I want to turn our attention to the NFC because this is where I have a little bit of chaos happening. I think that I have two underdogs winning in this round, and the third underdog that I don't have winning very well could. The Packers go to the Eagles at 4:30 on Sunday on Fox. That's the 7-2 matchup. The Packers were the 7th seed last year. They beat an NFC East team in the Cowboys. Very different circumstances. I was surprised that the Packers were the 7th seed. I wasn't quite aware that the Commanders, all they had to do was win to clinch the 6. Really thought this was a year where the Packers were going to be the 6th seed and the Commanders were going to be the 7. Didn't happen that way. So the Packers are going to go to Philadelphia. The Packers, again, they slid down to the 7th seed in the very final moments. They lost 2 division games by 2 in these last couple weeks. They lost to the Bears, which was devastating, and they lost to the Vikings in a close one. They played the Lions close. They lost to them by 3 earlier in the year. In week 1, these two teams played. The Eagles won this game by 5 in Brazil. I don't really care because that game was in week 1 months ago, and it was played in Brazil. Now this game is being played in Philadelphia. It's a much more different environment. It's a much more different situation. It's now the playoffs. Jalen Hurts is banged up. The Packers have contended with Super Bowl contenders all year. They lost in Minnesota by 2. They went to Detroit and lost by 3 since the bye week, right? I think the Packers are going to win this game in an upset. I think it's close, but Jalen Hurts is banged up. The Eagles fell apart at the end of the year last year. They made some changes. They worked their way up to the 2 seed. They have a phenomenal record. I believe they won 14 games. I just think this is a spot where the Packers have proven that they can go on the road and hang with division opponent Super Bowl contending teams like the Lions and the Vikings. I think they actually get it done this time, and I think it's partially because Jalen Hurts is banged up. I think it's partially just because of the nature of the Eagles and how hot the Packers are. Yeah, they're coming off a loss to the Bears, but I think that's what fuels them. Much like Ohio State loses to Michigan and then blows up Tennessee, now I think the Packers can have an opportunity to lose to the Bears and parlay that into a victory over the Eagles. I think they get it done. I think the Packers win in advance, and they play the Lions in the divisional rounds on the road. Commanders at Buccaneers is arguably the best game of the entire weekend. I think the NFC games are better than the AFC games. 6-seed Commanders are going to go to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. Buccaneers are favored by 3 at 8 p.m. on Sunday on NBC. This is the Sunday night game. People were a bit confused that this was the Sunday night game. I think it's fantastic. I think that this is the best game of the weekend. I'm so excited to watch it. I love Baker Mayfield. I love the Buccaneers. I also love the Commanders and Jaden Daniels, right? I think that everything about this matchup is fantastic. Mike Evans, I love. He hit that incentive in Week 18. That was very good for him. I love Baker Mayfield. I love Jaden Daniels. This is going to be so much fun to watch. Best game of the round, in my opinion. This game happened in Week 1 as well. This is also a Week 1 matchup, and Tampa won by 17. Very different situation, very different teams, really. Jaden Daniels in his first start. You, of course, have Tampa Bay on the other hand. Regardless, it's Week 1. It's a month ago. Both teams were getting into the fold. There's now been injuries. There's now been teams improving, teams sort of falling off in some ways. Buccaneers and Commanders both playing great football right now. The Commanders have won a lot of close games, and that includes close games against bad teams. Sure, they beat some playoff teams throughout the year, but they beat the Bears barely, right? Took that Hail Mary. The Commanders have won some really close games, and that's significant when you consider how close the playoff race really is. Tampa seems to be more consistent to me. And yeah, they were close against the Saints last week, but Baker Mayfield, more experienced quarterback. He's been in the playoffs before. He's won big playoff games before, specifically with the Browns, and even last year, right, against the Eagles. Jaden Daniels doesn't have that experience. Much of this Commanders team doesn't have this experience. I think this is a year where the Commanders make the playoffs. They lose, but they learn a lot, and they push that into next season where maybe they win the division. Maybe they do even more than that. I think the Buccaneers are going to win this game. I think they'll cover the 3 points, but it will be a close and very entertaining game across the board. I'm excited about the Buccaneers. I'm excited about Baker Mayfield, and I'm excited to see how far they can take this playoff run because I think the Buccaneers are a real dark horse team in the NFC. Another dark horse team in the NFC. You kind of have 2 of them in this game. Number 5 seed, the Vikings, just lost the 1 seed on Sunday Night Football against the Lions. They lost, I believe, 31-9 was the final score. They're favored by 1.5 on the road against the Rams. This is 8 o'clock on Monday on ABC. The Vikings just barely lost out on the 1 seed, like I said. The Rams have been close against good teams. They're similar to the Packers in this way. They've been close against good teams. went in a complete shootout against the Bills, scored over 40, lost out on that one. Matthew Stafford broke a ton of records, and that team still lost. The Vikings struggled a lot in the red zone in the last game. The Rams have been contending against good teams. They had this game at home. Is that fair? Probably not, but the Rams have this game at home. They won their division. I think the Rams are going to upset the Vikings, and that's maybe the hottest take I have. That's probably an even hotter take than the Packers and Eagles game, although the Eagles have a wider favorability, at least according to Vegas in that game. I think the Rams are going to win. I think the Rams have it in them. I think at home they're going to be capable of pulling together a potential victory. They settled for the 4 seed, and they play one of the best teams in the NFC. But the Vikings, just the way they looked last week and the way they have looked recently, Sam Darnold, he's fantastic. He might be a regular season quarterback. I don't know. He might be a regular season quarterback. He might not be the guy to sort of elevate the Vikings in a playoff setting. I think the Rams at home upset the Vikings, and I think that really upsets the rest of the NFC playoffs, because if that happens, the Rams would be going to the Buccaneers, and the Packers would be going to the Lions. So the Vikings would be out of the way, right? The Eagles would be out of the way. The Lions would have a clear shot to the Super Bowl, because the best team left is the Buccaneers, the 3 seed, 4 seed, 7 seed, and those, of course, the 3 and 4 seed aren't even that high in the NFC standings. They're just there because they won their division. So if my predictions are true, the Chargers would go to the Chiefs, incredible division game in the divisional rounds. Ravens would go to the Bills, fantastic game. That's an AFC championship level matchup in the divisional round, which means we'll get another one in the AFC championship between two teams that are actually there. The Packers are going to go to the Lions, another incredible division game. That game was a 3-point game in Detroit earlier this season. Rams at Buccaneers, great one. Two teams that are happy to be there. One of them has to go to the NFC Championship game, and that's what I think would be compelling. I think the Rams are going to beat the Vikings. I think the Buccaneers are going to beat the Commanders. I think the Packers are going to beat the Eagles. I think the Bills are going to win. I think the Ravens are going to win. I think the Chargers are going to win. And that's how I think the wild card round is going to go. I'm very excited to see it all play out. It's going to be a fantastic weekend and month of football. And that's why I consider the NFL playoffs to be the most wonderful time of the year.